Today is Thursday, October 1st, 2020. My name is Jackie Pedota, and I'm here today interviewing Heather for the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know that this interview will be placed in the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's something you do want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting. So I'll ask you a series of 5 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. There are 2 questions we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. Voces wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation at the Benson Library at UT Austin. We will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials you donate to Voces. Do you give Voces consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Benson Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant Voces copyright over the interview and any material you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Do you agree to allow us to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. So we have the questions in the pre-interview form that you already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server, and before we would send it out to the Benson Library, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or your family members that you put in there. So that won't be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the Benson?
Yes, I agree.
And then this is the last question. On occasion, Voces receives requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone number or your email with journalists?
No, I don't agree.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heather. I appreciate you because I know that's long, but
Oh, you're good.
we can get started by having you just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Heather. I graduated from UF a few years ago. I own a bookstore in Florida. I own a bookstore in Gainesville specifically. And, you know, things have changed a lot during COVID. So the way that we're doing business is changing every day. I grew up in Miami. I'm Cuban American. My mom was born in Cuba. My dad was born here. And I left Miami to go to college in Gainesville when I was 17. So I don't know if that's enough.
Yeah. So you talked about how COVID has changed, you know, what you all are doing on a day-to-day basis when it comes to business in the bookstore. And so can you explain more about that? You know, how have things changed? And then I guess kind of considering since it's this has lasted a long time, like how was it at the beginning and how has it shifted now?
Yeah. So I have a chronic health condition, and I really, when I first heard about what was going on, it kind of seemed like a meme on the internet. And the way that Florida has treated this has kind of been like a meme on the internet. But I closed my doors to the public March 16th, and this was after a week of having known about COVID a little bit, not, you know, that it was airborne, not that we should be wearing masks, like this wasn't really a thing yet. But there was a woman who, she lives across the street from my store, and she wasn't understanding why I couldn't let her use my phone. And I was like, well, you know, this is a device that is close to my face, it touches my face, and we're really not taking those risks right now. And there was already some news about people maintaining some sort of distance even without a mask, and people were standing really close to the counter. And so I decided that was it. Those were already 2 encounters in 1 week, and we didn't know what was happening, so I closed to the public. And luckily, at that point, it's been like 7 months. At that point, I had an online store for a little over a year, like a year and 2 months. And this was definitely not our main revenue stream. Most of our revenue was coming from in-person sales, people coming in to browse, picking up a card, stickers, a pin, which is stuff that I can't put on my online store due to just how our distribution works. But yeah, most of our sales were coming on the weekends and in person. The online sales really helped around the holidays, but that's about it. And after March, all of our income has come from the website specifically. I won't do pickup just because I have a chronic health condition, and I'm the only person at my store. We're just a 1-person operation. So if I get sick at all, I can't even process online orders. So I'm afraid to run that risk, And yeah, I think what's changed is I think, I haven't really interacted with the public at my store since that week, but it seems like people in Florida have kind of been emboldened by poor policy and policy that doesn't do enough. There's no statewide mask mandate. There's no there was no adequate PPE in hospitals even for a while. Yeah, I feel like in Florida, not a lot has changed. Things have opened and closed over and over again, and we're not learning. We should have been, well, not we, because I've been closed the whole time, but I think, bars, restaurants, should have been given adequate aid, so that they could afford to be closed. And the same goes for like literally any job. There just hasn't been the protections needed so that people don't feel required to go to work. But I mean, I think things have changed in other states, but I really can't say that it's changed a whole lot for us here.
And so, you mentioned now kind of basically most places being open. Are you all open, or has anything changed for you all in terms of, because I know also you used to put on like different events at the store as well. So has anything changed or just the same?
So I refuse to be open. This is a circus, and I'm not going down with everyone else who is just not wearing a mask and not social distancing, not limiting themselves to a small pod. I'm not doing it. It's not worth the risk for my health and for the health of my customers. I did do a lot of free community events before this happened. We've switched to entirely virtual. I've done some pretty big events, bigger than I think I would have done it at my new space. I also had just moved my business in January. So it, just when people were starting to realize that I had moved and that I wasn't closed, that I didn't close at my first location, but just rather that I had moved it. And it takes a while for people to follow that. Right when people were starting to realize that and come in, COVID kind of forced us to shut down. So we've been doing a lot of virtual events. I've connected with writers that I would not be able to have in person. So it's really cool to be doing that virtually with them. There's one author in Texas that I've worked with twice. She would have had to take a long drive to Florida to have an event with us. So I'm in some ways really thankful for the opportunities that having a virtual platform like Zoom or Crowdcast has given us. And I have one in 5 days. And I had one, today's the 1st. I had one on the 24th of last month. So we're having them pretty often. And we're just, it doesn't come with the same sort of like, hey, we're putting on an event, so you should buy a book. People buy less books with virtual events, I'm noticing, but people do come out, and I think it's because people really need the hope or just the connection involved with seeing your favorite writer or seeing your friends in the Zoom chat, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like you know, your patrons, they are really supportive of what you're doing, kind of like being very cautious and ensuring everyone, not just you, but everyone else is safe?
I'm gonna say yes and no. When So around when we closed, like March, I think people like didn't question why we were closed because we were still, I think we're still learning about COVID, but we were still learning how to deal with COVID as a business. I think, you know, this was that 8-week period where most places were just shut down. Like dentist office, doctor's offices, things like that. Um, but around April and May, I was getting a lot of emails from people, even at like 4 a.m, which is like, okay, my sleep schedule is horrible since the beginning of COVID too. But getting lots of emails like, why aren't you open? My friend wants to browse. You know, can we come in? And my store is pretty small. It's like maybe 1,000 square feet, if that. So, you know, it's not enough space for me, frankly, between me and people who are obviously still hanging out with friends. I don't know how many, or I don't know if they eat in a restaurant. You know, I don't want to take the risk. Um, but there's been a lot of people who send emails like, why aren't you open? And it's like, well, when there's an online option and someone is closed, you need to respect that boundary. So it got to the point where I started just citing the fact that I have an autoimmune disease, like, on our social media, and I've never been that open about my health with random people because there's no reason to. But I started just being like, yeah, I have an autoimmune disease, like, I'm closed, and that usually kept people kind of quiet in terms of the excuses or the demands that they would have. But I feel like people expect a perfectly clean bill of health from you all the time. And so I want to say like maybe like 10 to 15 people were kind of terrible about respecting that we were closed and not doing pickup, but everyone else has been pretty great.
And so you had previously mentioned that, you know, Florida has some basically treated this like a joke. And so I also know that, you know, you're in Gainesville, and different parts of Florida, they, you know, have somewhat of autonomy to just make different policy or just take different precautions. And so have you noticed anything like in Gainesville that maybe is particularly different from the rest of Florida as it relates to, you know, taking precautions against COVID, or have people been generally respectful? Because Gainesville can be an interesting place.
Yeah, so I do think that Gainesville has instituted some precautions more than maybe some rural counties. Um, and I've seen Miami really step up too and be like, yeah, no, even though we're doing a phase 3 reopening, we're not going to open. So yeah, I think that Gainesville has done an okay job. I wish that there was more. Like, I think the CARES Act was not enough. I think that, you know, if the U.S. had like maybe moved from wage labor to more like universal income, this wouldn't have happened because people would have been encouraged to stay home. But I have seen Gainesville kind of step up in terms of also the phase 3 reopening, deciding like restaurants are not going to be more than 50%. Some are still at 25, or excuse me, completely online, takeout, sorry, like, or outside, outdoor dining. There's not a lot of people eating in restaurants that I've noticed. And I mean, I don't think it should be happening, period, but there's a lot of like the online takeout orders and things like that. I think grocery stores have been kind of a free-for-all from the beginning. Some are doing a better job than others, but I have seen Gainesville kind of push back against the governor's orders of reopening and things like that. However, I think that UF is being very irresponsible. I think there was, the last time I checked, there was like 874 students in quarantine, and the way that they're quarantining students is irresponsible. Requiring students to be on campus is just irresponsible right now.
And so can you speak more, I guess, about that dynamic between UF and Greater Gainesville? Just because, I mean, you and I know, but people watching this might not.
Yeah, so our population increases significantly every fall through the spring semester. I think UF is 130,000 students. Does that sound right?
I guess if you're adding everyone, like professional students and yeah, that sounds somewhat accurate.
And I think the general population of Gainesville is 300,000, so that's almost half of the people who live here. So the influx of students every August, because summers here are generally pretty slow, and with this happening in March, UF kind of sent people home. People did the rest of their classes virtually. Summer was, I mean, still hard. We had a lot of spikes, I think, in July, but it was generally more chill just because there were no students. In August, that changed. A lot of students came back because their classes were not being offered online by the university, which is, you know, ridiculous that they wouldn't make that an option for every course, but you know, I can't change that. But essentially these students come in and they come to our businesses, they interact with, you know, the people who work at local businesses, the people who work at a restaurant, and these students are generally coming from areas that are have been hit harder by COVID, Miami, Orlando, South Florida in general. So there's been a spike in COVID cases here for sure. And I try not to look at the numbers because it's scary. But last Saturday, or this past Saturday, I was driving to a friend's house. They're one of the 4 friends I've seen in the past 7 months. And Main Street is the street with, you know, bars, restaurants. It's in our downtown area. And our downtown area has generally been pretty quiet since the start of this. Some bars have decided to do outdoor seating. They kind of eliminated the open container law, and you can kind of just like have a drink outside now. And there was 60 to 80 unmasked students in front of a bar on Main in a big group. And there was another group like that. Today's Thursday, so on Tuesday, probably about 100 to 150 people. And they're all students in gator gear or, you know, going out. And this affects our local community because, you know, these bars aren't being run by students, they're being run by local people. And in this case, they're being irresponsible too. But, you know, they interact with us at the supermarket and at the post office. So it's really hard to not have contact with this group of people. And I think a lot of students are taking this seriously, but there's definitely a bunch who are not.
Would you say that there is maybe a certain type of student that is not taking this as seriously as others?
Yeah, Greek life.
I guess, can you talk more to that? And, you know, because Greek life maybe might not be as big on other campuses. So can you speak more to that?
Yeah, so Gainesville has a pretty big Greek life population. I don't know the exact number, but generally white, generally legacy students, students who come from a higher tax bracket than people like myself. I went to UF on scholarship. But yeah, they are the ones who, I mean, they all live typically in a house together, which is already kind of concerning in a pandemic. But you know, if they were to stick with each other and that be it, that would be fine. But I mean, they're going out, they're going to Midtown, which is another area with bars, and it's pretty bad.
And so do you feel kind of in the way that people were, you know, trying to pressure you to open, do you feel like these local businesses in Gainesville are being pressured to open?
Oh yeah, I think there's definitely some pressure. You know, I've never been under the assumption that the customer's always right thing. I think a lot of customers are pressuring restaurants to open 100% or pressuring them to have dine-in. I know that there's a pizza spot specifically that they haven't had their dining room open, and people repeatedly harass them about when the dining room will be open. And it's like, yo, just go to the park if you want to eat outside of your home. But I think that there is definitely a fair amount of people who are pressuring local businesses to be open in a different capacity if they were already open. And if they've been closed, then there's the pressure to just be open in general. I mean, there's just a whole disrespect of people's boundaries regarding the literal plague.
And so have you seen, just being a local small business owner yourself, have you seen the community kind of come together? Because Gainesville is you know, a lot of small businesses, and we've already seen this pandemic impact small businesses. Like, so many small businesses have closed. I think I read somewhere, like, you know, if by the end of the pandemic, whenever that is, like 1 in 6 small businesses would have closed. So how is that impacting Gainesville, and how are, you know, local business owners kind of coming together, if they are?
Well, I think the CARES Act kind of helped. Some businesses got it, some businesses got the paycheck program thing, but you have to make a significant amount of profit to qualify for those things in general. And I don't even pay myself, so I never got that. I never got aid besides from Bank, which is a organization to support booksellers. They're like a national organization. I think that local businesses are afraid. We've lost a few restaurants. There's Civilization, which was like close to me. I know Felipe's is closing in this next month. Leonardo 706 closed. I mean, there's a bunch of restaurants that have just been closing. So I can't say that there's like a, a Facebook group or anything like that of business owners just being upset, but I do have friends who run businesses, and it's something that we talk about on our own. I'm in a Facebook group of indie booksellers around the country. I think it might even include Canada, but we talk. I've mostly been in touch with people who run bookstores around the country, because that's the group of people who would like most understand what I'm going through right now.
And so what have been like the sentiments in that group? Like what has been shared amongst y'all?
Yeah, so I'm in a few different groups. I'm in a group of bookstores run by one person, and that has been the most helpful, I think, because it's a lot on one person to do all the work that we do. I mean, it's running social media, it's running the online store, which is almost like a separate business than our in-person, storefront. It runs completely differently. You have to learn how to use a website, shipping, webmasters, all these things, distribution, and planning virtual events is a whole other skill set. And knowing the right people to reach out to, connecting with writers, building those relationships. I think the general sentiment has been like just clinging on to anything that is positive or hopeful for that week, or that month. In some places it's been hard, especially like in California, where the wildfires have been pretty bad and people weren't able to be open. I don't think there's any other, I don't think I've interacted with a Florida bookseller in these, but I have friends in New Orleans and New York, and I've kept in touch probably most with people in New York just because I used to live there. And there's a few bilingual bookstores in Brooklyn and Queens who really get what I'm trying to do, but it's been really tough for all of us.
And so I want to go back to kind of what you had said, like the CARES Act not really being enough, both for individuals, but then also not really serving small businesses well. I know some, towns and cities have set up like their own kind of either CARES Act or mutual aid. Has Gainesville done anything like that?
So yes to both. Gainesville did have its own CARES Act. The amount of paperwork necessary and the requirements seemed a little bit counterproductive to helping the people who need it. So I don't really know a whole lot of people who have gotten it. And that have talked about it, like I'm sure people got aid and just didn't want to talk about it, which is understandable. There is a mutual aid group that has been really on point. A good friend of mine is an admin for it. You can get anything you need from, dog food to fresh vegetables to, a ride to the doctor. So I luckily have not needed anything from the group, but I am in it. And I think the last time I checked, it was like maybe 2,000 people in it. So it is a thing for people in Gainesville, that if they need it, it is there and it exists. And I anticipate it will be a thing for a while, because I mean, this isn't over,
Yeah, well, that's great that the group is very active for folks that need it.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you said that thankfully, like, you haven't really been needing services like that. And so would you say, would you say that you've not been as economically impacted as other folks in the area?
Oh, I've definitely been economically impacted. But my parents are really wonderful people and have helped me a lot. My car completely crapped out on me in June. I needed a new car, which, like, running a business right now without a car when, you know, you have to ship out everything would be impossible. And, you know, I needed a new computer because everything is virtual, and my Mac was from like 2012, and overwhelmed by like the smallest tasks. And this becomes really hard to get your job done. Like, it's hard to make graphics or a Google Doc or plan a virtual event when your technology is just not there and working for you. I haven't crunched the exact numbers to look at our revenue decreases, but like an average week at the store, I was probably making like maybe a little over $1,000, maybe like $1,500, like if I was being really generous. And there's some weeks on my store where I only make $150. So I mean, that's a huge cut. So yeah, I mean, we always expect the summer to be slow in Gainesville, but you know, we expected having the influx of graduation gifts, people buying before they left for the summer, and then also I thought that things would be better by fall, and that we would have a fall semester where people can come in and buy a book, and we just can't do that.
Yeah, that's really difficult, but I'm glad to hear that you have at least some support from your family to kind of be able to, you know, especially like you said, needing a car, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to transition to another topic, mostly because I know that like you're very active in social justice movements, and you know, not, you know, COVID hasn't been the only thing that is happening right now. And so I know, you know, kind of what you had mentioned, having a chronic illness, but, you know, there's also all of these demonstrations and protests for racial justice happening. And so what has like organizing activism looked like for you, knowing kind of your medical status right now?
Yeah, so I didn't go to the first march that was here, because it seemed it wasn't planned by people who I knew were experienced organizers, and I just didn't know if people would be wearing masks and socially maintaining distance. So I did not go to that first march. I've been to maybe 5 or 6 since everything has happened with George Floyd. I've been to some in rural areas that were pretty terrifying. There was a lot of confrontation. I got some basic training. I took one class through Zoom to be like a guerrilla medic, and just, you know, help people if I have a first aid kit. So I'm doing everything I can in a limited capacity. If I know people who are going and I trust them, who know about my illness, they look out for me, and we all kind of, it's 2 of the people who, of the 4 friends that I've seen, are pretty active as well. So we usually go together, and yeah, it's been weird for sure. Like, but I think that every single thing that I've been to, everyone has had a mask except counter protesters.
Yeah, can you share more about the different protests you've been to and demonstrations? You even said the ones in rural communities were particularly terrifying. So just any additional like observations, like kind of like what you had said, how some of, you know, most of the people that were putting on the protest had masks, but the counter protesters didn't. And so any additional, information, observations will be helpful, because, you know, as we can see, there's been a lot of mixed information shared about what's going on.
Yeah, so there was some demonstrations in some cities not far from here, but outside of our county. And it was at their supervisor of elections office. There's been some talk about removing Daughters of the Confederacy statues in Florida. And so I went to one of those, and a protest for one of those to get the statue removed. It was bad. People got really in each other's face. Counter protesters who asked about, you know, different organizations that were tabling there, and just wouldn't stop. There was one man who just stared at a friend of mine for like a minute and a half, and I have it recorded on video because we thought he would just like snap and throw a punch or something. And these counter protesters are really emboldened by you know, the high tension, and not, I mean, they're just emboldened by being racist. And there was some neo-Nazi paraphernalia on cars driving by that protest. They were kind of circling the area. So that was also terrifying, especially as a Latina. But yeah, I mean, these people are generally white. They're generally probably poor, and not realizing that you know, they're part of the working class too, and they could benefit tremendously from policies that would help people of color and also poor people.
Yeah, to your point, you know, in the different protests and demonstrations that you've participated in during these last 6 months, has anyone kind of tried to open up a dialogue like that?
Do you mean like counter protesters trying to have a conversation?
Yeah, or like even protesters trying to begin a dialogue as well, because like you said, that can be a very convincing argument, maybe to some.
Well, I think at these protests, like, there are people who share their stories, and you know, they grab the mic and they talk about the shit that they've been through. And I don't know if I can curse here, sorry. But you know, there's a fair amount of even like elected officials who came out just to share about their platform, and what they stand for, and show some support. There's different orgs that came out that are unrelated to electoral politics. There was like individual people who talked about their experiences, you know, with police brutality, homelessness, things like that. But I have found that the few times that counter protesters have actually approached people, when I've been around, it is not to engage in a dialogue. It's to ask questions and start a dialogue, but it's really to instigate a fight, because you're not changing their mind.
And so why do you think that is?
I mean, I think that is for a lot of reasons. This country, yeah, I'm not going to continue my sentence, but I'll try to think of a better answer. Can I come back to that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. But we can talk, I guess, more specifically about organize, like different types of organizing that I know that is happening right now around voting and access to voting. And so what have you seen happening in Gainesville or Alachua County or the surrounding counties to get out the vote?
Yeah, so I think I need to start by saying that I think that liberals use electoral politics as the only sort of political action they ever do, and that's really toxic and not good. Or every time that somebody has a story about something they've been through, well, then they're like, oh, go vote. And it's like, we got exactly here by voting. So first I need to start by saying that, like, my investment in electoral politics is low. And that doesn't mean that I won't quietly vote and do what I need to do in that aspect, but it means that I know that voting is not going to solve the problems that we have. The problems that we have are bigger than voting. I'm more in support of direct action and demonstrations. So with that said, I think there are a lot of organizations doing a lot to make sure people are at least registered to vote. I've, man, how long ago was this? I don't know, a while ago, probably like a year ago, I was like registering voters so that for our local election, we could vote out the sheriff who's pretty corrupt. And we did, so that was really cool. But I think there are a lot of orgs doing a lot of online events, online canvassing, social media coverage, infographic stuff about voting and getting registered. So I think that's a thing, but I can't say that I'm involved in that.
And so unless you want to go back and answer the question that I posed, and if not, that's also fine. I want to be respectful of your time because I know you're hella busy. And so if you want to share anything else about your experiences living through COVID, experiencing, navigating this time, you know, you can share whatever you'd like that I haven't asked you yet.
So I could do both of those things. To go back to that question of like, why do you think that counter protesters are not listening? It's because they don't want to listen. They don't want to have an idea presented to them that challenges their viewpoints because they're extremely insecure in their own position in this country. Whiteness is the one thing they hold on to. For the next question, you know, it's really tragic that billionaires have become so much richer in the past 7 months while small businesses die. You know, like we're seeing our favorite restaurants close, we're seeing our favorite local spots close, and those spots are what add the charm and personality to the places that we live in. It's representative of our culture, and you know, when you think about it, like businesses run by people of color, queer people, Latinx people, these businesses are hubs for other people in our own communities. And when these businesses go away, what happens is they get replaced by, you know, like chains. And, you know, like I certainly don't want my bookstore to be replaced by an Amazon Books, or to see my favorite Mexican restaurant be replaced by a Chili's. And it's really tragic that like Bezos has been making so much money off of this pandemic. And I think that's like something that this system needs to reevaluate. You know, when people are poor and struggling, why is it that the rich become richer?
And so I know I said that this was the last thing, but I have a question, you know,
You're good.
related to that. What do you think, or I guess in your opinion, what would be the solution to mitigate folks accumulating so much wealth, both in general, but especially during a pandemic?
Well, for one, we could start taxing them.
Oh, can you speak more to that?
yeah, I mean, Amazon has paid $0 in taxes. Trump paid apparently $750 in 2016 and 2017 in income tax. I have paid more than that for a business in which I don't pay myself. So, you know, taxing, why are there tax breaks for the rich and not the people who are putting money back into the system to have functional roads, to have functional schools? Why do the rich not have to put back into that? I think that needs to be reevaluated.
Okay, and then now I swear this is the last.
You're good.
If you wanted to share anything else to kind of close us out, or anything else that I've not asked you that you wanted to talk about.
I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Heather. I really appreciate your perspective and your stories and your experiences holding it down in Gainesville. I miss y'all.
We miss you too.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Let me know if you need anything else from me.